This is Marc Mullinax, and you're in the class called Power for the Peaceful, a free podcast class on the Apple and Spotify platforms, and a somewhat visual version on the YouTube platform. Just type in your search engines, Power for the Peaceful. Our class is on a long march through the 81 verses of Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. We use my 2021 translation of this work, published by Fortress Press. Today, verse 61, Tao's Diplomacy.
When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. The sweet sound of the river as she moves over the stones. The same song that the blood in your body sings as it weaves around your bones. When you're listening, are you listening?
The female doesn't make the first move. It is always the male that makes the first move. To move first means to lose. To wait means to gain. To move means to be above. To wait means to be below. The great state that doesn't presume its superiority gains the voluntary support of the small state. The small state that is content with its inferiority enjoys the generosity of the great state. The small state doesn't have to worry about being lower, while the great state does. Hence, the great state needs to learn to be lower. Wu Chang.
Our reader today is Nina Sabatino, who describes herself this way.
I am here. I am present. Yet I am always learning, changing, and growing. And at least at this moment, I'm mostly content with that.
Nina and I are members of a Tao Te Ching reading group centered in West Asheville, North Carolina. So, Nina, let's get right to our verse today. Would you please read it for us now?
61. Feminine Diplomacy. The power of a great state should be like a river delta, which welcomes all waters to commingle at its lowest point. One can compare this mingling to the feminine in nature, who goes low with her natural stillness as the key to her receptivity. What is the lesson here? A small state can win over a great state through service. Likewise, whenever a great state wishes to gather and protect people, it may practice this feminine diplomacy to win over a small one. Nature's way is to go low and serve with a partnering mind. This way, both great and small get what they need. But it behooves the great to bow first.
Thanks very much. Quick reminder that we are near the midpoint of our 11-verse emphasis on Taoist leadership styles and principles. Principles demonstrated as true by their use by thoughtful, non-autocratic parents, governments, teachers, and even cooks, as we saw last time. The verses between 57 and 67 carry a lot of wisdom for such occupations. I recommend their study by folks in leadership, for teachers, parents. Lots of applications in these verses. For example, there are many things we need to remember to lose or to retire from. The number one thing to retire is one's self-own ego. And there's one thing to remember, and that is that Wu Wei has a special standout pattern in all life, all organizations, and all relationships. Not doing things on purpose, as in not overthinking or pre-thinking, not controlling. In a word, Wu Wei is the practiced awareness of doing just enough in any given context or situation, and then retiring. Wu Wei is not woo-woo, but is a training and a practice to loosen the seduction of naked power's hold on us, and instead just recreate the natural conditions where people, especially children, thrive. Taoism is that simple. Yet it's difficult to retrain ourselves for greatness by retiring our sense of entitled empowerment. Can we imagine a world where greatness does not mean developing ego-assisted schemes to grow out of the sense of self, but instead, greatness is uncovering our already inherent, natural tendencies to be in community, to serve the greater goods, and to enable futures where our temporary greeds, hatreds, and ignorances no longer have their day or their say. The only power that lasts is the giving up of temporary power to be number one, in a world where only the first and the number ones count. Today's verse brings the reader back into verse 8's pairing of Tao understanding and water, and also verse 6's radical affiliation of Tao with the feminine. So listen out for those.
The world turns to a great state just as rivers flow downstream. If a great state can lower itself, small states will attach themselves to it. If a small state can lower itself, a great state will take it under its care. A great state lowers itself to govern others. A small state lowers itself to be governed by others. Su Che.
So Nina, what initial questions or first impressions did all this verse bring to you?
My very first thought when reading this chapter was that quote from My Big Fat Greek Wedding. And the mother's talking to her daughter, and she says, the man is the head, but the woman is the neck. And she can turn the head any way she wants.
Cool. Yeah.
And so a little different, but
Yeah.
it just made me think of that. And then thinking about the great state taking the lowest position, like the ocean. And I think to embody that truth would be to recognize that there is zero separation between the great state and the small state. Just like the ocean is only made up of all the water that's flowing into it.
Perfect, yes. Yeah.
And I guess that had me thinking about in the U.S., like what that would look like. And I think there would be, no great state or small state, but rather a one people or one state, whom people elect others to hold greater responsibility, to govern and protect and serve the whole people. And I think if those that are given greater responsibility can do so without seeking power, then the general public can trust them, and then the general public serves each other through adapting like water to the needs that need to be met. And I feel like growing up, I was taught that the government is meant to exist for the people and to serve the people. So I think there is a sense of awareness that of our natural way. Like we do know and remember, but I think I think like you've said before, like the ego really, once it goes through the ego, it gets really tangled up.
Meanwhile, we are reminded that there's a world out there that needs sirens. Thank you very much for that observation. I loved it very much. If or when we look at a map or a globe of the earth, you see these usually blue-colored places. Or if you're high on an airplane and looking down on water, you can see that they're always the lowest places. So on the maps, these blue places indicate bodies of water, streams, rivers, marshes, oceans. Water goes from high to low, without effort, without force, and then it collects in the lowest places. And as it does, it connects all and every place through which it courses. It moves, yes, but not with a sense of self. It just follows what is, that is, gravity. You know when water's been there. There's a fluency in water, a smart wisdom that knows but does not do. It does not fight reality, that is, gravity. It just goes where the land guides it, and it does its good work. Wherever it goes, life itself just happens. Every single year, 10,000 cubic miles of water pours from rivers into the sea. If this does not happen as it does, this planet is done for. Respect for the low places of the world, that's where the basic processes of Tao happens. To Lao Tzu, Yielding is the most attractive power in the world. This yielding is not the preference of the power seeker, though. The power seeker, that is the fame chaser, they have forgotten their original instructions and processes and seek after ever temporary schemes and fixes. No one and nothing really prefers low places like water today. Water, though, is the shape-shifting diplomatic core of Tao. Just observe how oceans and lakes all receive all by going low. Heck, water even accepts pollution. The power of anything great, or if one has a mind to activate their inner greatness, they should be like water, a delta that welcomes all things at the lowest possible point. Act like water, and you will live. Refuse, and you get all brittle and you break upon the rocks. Water is the most elemental of the elements. It wears down mountains, erodes all the hard places, cleans out the dirt, and makes the rough paths smooth. With water alone, the tough becomes tender. Like time, water wears things away. It outlasts every unnatural thing. There's no place this shape-shifting water cannot go, and where it goes, its diplomacy also grows.
The reason the sea can govern 100 rivers is because it has mastered being lower. Red pine. Power flows down to every level of existence like a river to the ocean. Ron Hogan.
So water just satirizes power, as power is most often portrayed and chased. The sense of power that Lao Tzu satirizes was most blatantly preached about by a modern Chinese leader, Mao Zedong, a 20th century Chinese revolutionary, who said,
"Political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. The seizure of power by armed force, the settlement of issues by war, is the central task and the highest form of revolution. This Marxist-Leninist principle of revolution holds good universally for China and all other countries. Without armed struggle, neither the people nor the Communist Party would have any standing at all." From Little Red Book quotations from Chairman Mao Zedong.
So that's a power-hungry worldview, and like that one, every power-hungry worldview today agrees that power is an extension or a projection of strength designed to influence others to do your will, whether by subterfuge or outright aggression. Our cultures around the world romanticize the warrior way. To become a warrior is often to bring the highest pride to your family. To be a warrior is touted to be the highest and best examples of strength and courage and even personality. Parents, aided by mass media, give kids military-like games to play, action figures to model themselves after. And many of our national holidays commemorate military events, not demonstrations of no power. We learn such paths to power in our cradles, and in most of us, they last to the grave. If power cannot be attained diplomatically, then power is forced in us, like a crowbar. The logical ultimate weapon in this kind of power's arsenal is nuclear power, one which transforms the energy of the universe's stars into weapons that kill.
The only power is no power. It's the not struggling for power. That's where the power is. Russell Hoban.
Today's verse 61 reverses this thinking. There's another power that harnesses the universe's energy. It is not the way of destruction by splitting atoms, but the way of transformation by water. Water chooses the lowest, most invisible path. It offers no resistance, but wears down all resistance. Flowing as water, breathing as mist, expanding as ice, moving as a river, cleaning and filtering like a marsh, water has infinite ways to adapt, change, and bring the dead to life. We all live downstream. Our very lives are based upon the eons-long processes that have developed in oceans, streams, marshes, and ponds. Absent them, we'd be absent too. So, Nina, what kind of questions about the reversing of power do you have?
Honestly, I've thought about it, and I'm really not sure if reversing the expectations of power is completely possible. But I do feel from my core that it's worth having faith in. And maybe from this quiet revolution that kind of flows beneath the surface like groundwater, maybe slowly over time, that way of leading will sort of erode at the broken structure that exists and eventually cause it to collapse. That is something I have faith in, but I don't know if I'll at least be alive to ever see it.
Well, I think you will be alive to see it because you may see it in small ways all around you every day. That power of demonstrating no power, of uniting and cooperating and sharing. You've seen probably that, like in the hurricane recently. You saw people just give of themselves without thinking. So I think it's there. And here's where I think it works is that it's already there. But we think too much. And sometimes when we get in times of trouble, like with Hurricane Helene, we may stop the thinking and we go to another place. And that place is our natural ability to share, to take in other people and share resources, which I think we saw happen in a very wonderful kind of way. So I think that hope is there. It is not so much maybe in the political realm of power seekers, but where I get hope is when I walk in the forest by myself or sit by a stream and whatever is there gets transferred in, or it calls to within what is already there within me. So it's like hope calling to hope. And where I get my hope that these days is the processes of Tao that renews every spring, where water cleanses something that's dirty. No matter what happens, there's goodness already happening at the same time. So that's where my hope comes from. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a good reminder to me that whether we try to have control over things or not, the natural world plays itself out continuously. And I think from my understanding, it does seem like these systems that seek power, they always fail. No matter how much it may build itself up. Historically, it seems like it always fails. And maybe it's a question, but why do you think, like with Hurricane Helene, why do you think we tend to so easily, like, collectively come together and practice what is more natural when things go bad?
That's a great question. I think that whenever we get interrupted in our thinking or interrupted in our lives, some of us go quickly to the catastrophizing and oh my gosh, the sky is falling. But yet, as we saw in a significant number of people were driving towards the people who needed help, the people who were dying, the people who were flooded out. People were driving to them. Why? Did the government tell them to? No. I think they were responding to something that was inherent, which is what we're born with. Same thing happened with Hurricane Katrina. The day after, hundreds of boats started arriving and putting into the water to rescue who they could rescue. Nobody told them. It was spontaneous, just like that. So that's why I have this faith that there's something already there. But I think in our usual politics, our usual ego schemes, that gets overcrowded or overshadowed. But it's always been there. We are part of Tao, and we are rooted in Tao. And these processes keep the world going, as far as I'm concerned.
That was a great answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Collecting power in the ego is not the way of Tao. The ego cannot harness the power of Tao, not like the low places of the universe can. Collecting power in the ego has never, ever been the way of Tao by which the universe has ever operated. Lao Tzu, that Chinese spiritual experimenter, Seeing the utter bankruptcy and moral emptiness and the all too brief lives of power grabbing and power keeping, Lao Tzu asks us to adopt an opposite approach. Recognize the value of humility. Instead of trying to be bigger, stronger, and more powerful than others, Lao Tzu suggests we embrace humility, to become like the human being we are meant to be, like the sea level toward which all streams flow along their path to the sea. This is the feminine approach, which is one of stillness, equanimity, peace. No one taught water to do this. It's in water's original instructions. Get this, these same instructions are already residing in us, but maybe forgotten, neglected, dismissed. But what if there's this quieter wisdom already in play? The power of service, the wisdom of acceptance, and the quiet charging of all things from below. So there's no place for conflict, war, or flawed notions of being greater than or less than when a country is at one with Tao. We've tried it the other way. It has never worked. Perhaps it's time for us to approach world affairs and foreign policy with an altogether different approach. Water, without effort, creates a space for life and does not discriminate between culture, class, or condition. Diplomacy can follow water's lead, provide for and serve the world, not just one geographic space or one species. And then we can return to our original self and our original purpose that have always been there, awaiting our return. This does not mean that we become the spineless doormats of the world. To embody the Tao is to be in the perfect balance of Wu Wei, not idle passivity. It is a state of alignment and a necessary recalibration after centuries of spending lives and treasure and time striving to subjugate and dominate others. True victory is not the so temporary state of being on top. It's the sharing of basics, the spreading of power to all, the serving and not the dominating. The great person, the sage, the great leader of a state is like unto the sea. The sage welcomes all at the bottom of a watershed. She does not fight or censor the smallest in-current. Come on in, she cries. There is space and enough for everyone. So a country, a people, a corporation, an educational institution, and even a parent, each and every one, hold within themselves a generous welcoming of both high and low, using yin powers of humility, apparent weakness, and yielding. This is the power for peace, the power of the peaceful. Power flows, folks. Power is not held, not to be regarded like a rechargeable battery that aggregates power in just one place and for usually just one purpose. No, Tao is this universal energy source, custom made so that all Tao's creatures are always charging and discharging their duties. One energy, useful in an infinite variety of ways, ever present and never twice the same. The 3rd century Common Era Chinese philosopher Wang Bi says this:
By cultivating humility, each gets what he wants. When the small state cultivates humility, it preserves itself. But that is all. It can't make the world turn to it. The world turns to the great state that cultivates humility. Thus, each gets what it wants. But it is the great state that needs to be more humble.
When you're listening, are you listening? When you're listening, are you listening?
This verse has some great word nerdery. The character Pen is in this chapter, and it warrants our special attention. In its phrase,
One can compare this mingling to the feminine in nature, who goes low, with her natural stillness as the key to her receptivity.
this word pen is that word feminine, and here it means female animal. So here in the context of interactions between large and small states, its meaning is not any particular female entity, like a female ginkgo tree or a female animal, but the more abstract feminine essence of existence, yin energy, if you will. At no time is this pen or this feminine is to be localized to one species, nor should it serve as a stand-in for the human female. So we cannot make any cultural assumptions that this means a human female in particular, like when we use the word wife. Etymologically, in Chinese, pen refers to the shape of a gorge, or the great receiving valley of verse 6, or any shape in the profile of female genitalia. Geography, then, is destiny, not biology. The natural curve of land, the natural pull of gravity brings together every good blessing and resource. These gatherings are not loud. They're not covered by the news. They just are. And these low places, oceans, ponds, and lakes, produce living, sharing ecosystems. Their systems, their processes enable all life. There is no personality, no sense of being, no sense of self in water. Water is empty of these, and thus it is nurturing without discrimination. The great among us should emulate this way, or Tao of water, of flowing to the low. This is the only wisdom that lasts. And may our generation see the last sad chapter in thoughtless, wisdomless public polity of aggression that rejects everything except its injured sense of self. This is the only wisdom that lasts. It's the power for peace, the only one, and the first and lasting power for the peaceful. The Taoist feminine always gets the better of male power by its stillness. Stillness is not just quiet, it is quieting. So in the Tao sense, the greater state wants only to take the smaller under its wing without exploitation. A great country should not need aggression and force to influence smaller countries. It should be like the ocean. Its yielding stillness is enough. Its size will attract smaller countries to it, like the sea attracts river water. Likewise, a small state wants only to have its status and abilities accepted by the other. When both the larger and the smaller want to find their proper place, it is Taoist wisdom that the large quietly assumes the lower position, which actually shows that they, the lower, are the greater. As our verse today concludes,
Nature's way is to go low and serve with a partnering mind. This way, both great and small get what they need, but it behooves the great to bow first.
the overall context is clear. By embracing this essence, by remaining open and receptive, the large country becomes the nexus or focal point of resources and assets flowing in from everywhere. When yielding, the great country still, for lack of a better word, it conquers, but it conquers with a countercultural kindness and attractive harmony. When this Tao principle is applied to a more powerful person, like with teachers or in a business setting, the more powerful should be gracious and generous in inviting relationships. Harmony for the larger means harmony for the smaller, and vice versa. The less powerful student or client can then follow the lead in approaching the exchange, whether economic or educational, with a similar attitude of humility. Humility is the beginning of lasting diplomacy. Humility is the origin of mutual courtesy among people. So, as we start to conclude, what questions or thoughts does all this bring to you, Nina?
So, this had me thinking about, how water knows when to use force. It also knows when to retire that force. And it doesn't ask why. And so I do believe and have a lot of faith in that if we individually and therefore collectively master our own minds by remembering who we really are beneath the ego, and through the practice of embodying the way, we can change the world over time and change it in a way that allows for the ego to express itself without dominating everything. And so I do have a question. How do you think I or you or anyone can reconcile that internal drive for justice for the oppressed with also embodying power that positions itself from the lowest point? And I ask this because I really struggle, because I recognize that there are folks, including myself, who, for various reasons, have really never had to what sometimes to me feels like the luxury of only flowing like water. They must, people who are oppressed, I feel like, they must either submit to following the rules for their survival or rebel and face the consequences. And more specifically, I think about like Black mothers who have lost their children to police brutality, and how they are forced to learn how to cope with that. And even if that lesson is valuable, mothers have been forced to learn that lesson through a system of power that serves to oppress them. So how do we reconcile that justified pain and anger and desire for, to me, what feels like wrath, with humility?
Next question. That's a great one, gosh. Wow. Well, first of all, and this is something I address in the book, but if you follow Tao and practice Wu Wei, you will become a cultural misfit. You will see things that are not yet. And you can ask, why isn't this happening? We're smart enough already. It's not enough to ask just why crime happens in a certain place in town, but say, what's going on in that place in town or with this group of people that enables injustice to happen? So what is going on there? What are we not seeing? And a Taoist or a Christian misfit can see these things and say, here's a spotlight that I'm going to shine on a bad situation. I may not have to do anything. I'm just going to shine the light, expose it, and sometimes it just dies from the exposure. So that's one way. The other way is, and some social justice folks will not like this, but we are free as Taoists not to respond, because sometimes we will respond in knee-jerk ways, almost in kind of the ways that we were treated or mistreated. And that's not a place or a way, I think, to respond. But instead, what if we, like our verse says, become receptive, sparking conversations between people who naturally or have for centuries hated each other? What is it that we can do by opening up our inner resources? So I have no idea if I'm addressing this question, because as a person of privilege, and white privilege at that, I don't have this as my everyday meat and potatoes. So, do you have any thoughts to help me out here?
I don't know if my thoughts will help you out, but
Yeah.
For me as a woman,
Yeah.
I do feel anger,
Yeah.
and an anger that feels really justified.
Yeah.
And just like you've said that, and I agree. I feel like I've received some flack also for expressing to others that maybe taking a non-reactive approach would be better.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's difficult when. So I think it's still a hard one for me, and I feel like maybe over time as I learn more,
Mm-hmm.
I'll better understand. And I don't think there is one clear answer to that. But what do I do with my feelings that want to react and have justice for the way that I and so many others have been wronged or oppressed? I do agree. Having a more non-reactive approach and listening to others more rather than reacting. And like you said, sort of breaking that barrier or that wall of fear that really only exists because I feel like our system has been set up in a way to build that wall. in my head, I see it as either being things, things being the way they are now or completely better. And I think I'm learning to recognize that it's a process.
Okay.
I don't know if any of that's useful to you.
It may be.
So that was a lot of me just.
Yeah, that is. First of all, I am so enthralled by the efforts throughout the world to start to bring to courts the idea that trees and land have standing in court. Right now, nobody's listening, but occasionally you get a little bit of a win where it's not just a human being that has the final say, but you take the rights of a tree or a forest or an ecosystem to remain there. And these little things edge in, get their nose under the tent just a little bit, and they get bigger and bigger. So I have faith there that we still need to do some social justice work. But I'm also saying, by studying Taoism, that there are multiple ways to build a wall that you're talking about, but also to tear it down. In the West Bank, there is a wall, and you should just see the graffiti on that wall that just satirizes the powers that put that up there. And that is tremendously powerful. But I think there's a very wu-wei action there. Another wu-wei action happened in Argentina in the 1980s. I love this example. It was the No More Pots campaign, in which folks that were disenfranchised by the dictator government then would gather in city squares, and they'd bring the pots from their kitchen, just mostly women. They'd bring pots and a big spoon, and they just bang, 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 and they'd do it for hours. And it drove the people in power crazy. So finally the government had to make this one assertion: no more pots. But they didn't stop. And so the women were enabling their own power to grow by just refusing to acknowledge that the state has this power. They did, we'll go to jail, however many it takes, but we won't take life. We won't act in kind, in the same coin. So maybe that's a lesson for us.
Yeah, when I think about, to me, what a non-violent revolution would look like, that is very similar to what I think of, in that rather than fighting and using force, rather just living inherently free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not bucking up against the rules, but just simply living by your own rules, living by your own right to exist. But if you just keep meeting that oppression with this steady resistance, there's kind of nowhere for the people in power. You kind of become immovable. And so, I have faith in that.
I have faith in the unexpected. Nobody in 1989 knew that the Iron Curtain would fall. And within 2 or 3 weeks, it was just a mess. It was just collapsed totally. In the past few weeks, Syria has just, nobody expected the changes that have happened there. Now, things are not all settled down. We don't know the future. But to have a dictator and his father for 50 years control the country, and now it's suddenly gone. Look at what can happen. And so I think that's how Tao works. Under the scenes, under the covers, and I think it often produces surprises. My job is to try to keep in touch with the wu-wei of what do I need to retire in order for the natural processes that may get inside of a people. How can that come to flower? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, what chapter is it where it talks about that whoever leads, like at the end of the day, the people will say they've done it themselves. But it makes me think of that chapter.
Okay. Verse 17, no traces. The best leaders leave no trace of their governing among the people. The second best are known by the love of the people. The third best are obeyed through fear. Then come the despised and the reviled. It is obvious that when a person does not trust himself, he hardly inspires others' trust. The leader's words are few, but each is priceless. Whatever she promises is a done deal. And after her accomplishments, everybody says, it all happened naturally. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Like you were saying, this sort of Taoist way of doing things, it happens underneath the surface. And so that when the change happens, people kind of, it feels unexpected, but really it's been this quiet effort. And it's so quiet because it doesn't seek power. But it's always happening underneath the surface.
It's just hard for us to see these same old injustices happen all the time, and it seems like there's no quick fix. So that's the frustrating part. Tao does not promise quick fixes, and a lot of revolutions do, and more power to them, but not Taoism. All right, folks, it's time to conclude. If you want to take the high road, take to the low. The low is the only power that does not imitate our ego-centered power grabs. So once again, Wu Wei shows itself here. Inserting our own self or ego desires at every opportunity serves no one. The way to serve is to retire from being master of the universe. That's what water does. For water is the master element in the universe for life. But when does water, just by doing its thing out of sight, post Facebook or Instagram pictures about how awesome it is? It just doesn't. Homework, my students. Make space for those in society that you may consider under you, whether in your thinking or in your habits. If you're an employer, make space for employees to contribute out of their strengths and passions. If you're a teacher, provide an atmosphere for students to find links to everyday's subject matter wherein they see themselves in new ways. Parents, get your parenting points by letting the young set some agendas or schedules and do your parenting as a partner. Finally, a child-friendly version of our verse 61 called Gentle Strength. Imagine a big river meeting smaller streams. The big river doesn't fight to be the highest or the strongest. It stays low and lets the streams flow into it. This is how nature teaches us to be gentle and welcoming, like the way the earth quietly holds everything. So what can we learn? Even a child can work with big people by helping and sharing. And if a big person wants to apply for the job of taking care of everyone, they should start by being kind and open, just like the big river. When we stay humble and ready to help, both big and small can grow stronger together. This free podcast is a production of many, including Nina Sabatino, partnering with me on vocals. Thank you. Audrey Davis on artwork, Molly Hartwell singing. Fortress Press holds the copyright for quotations from my Tao Te Ching translation used here. May your days begin in peace and become the deep oceans full of the ever-present and custom-made hope your world requires.
Are you listening?